All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Shem, Yahweh Shai, through His Son, Yahweh Shai, Mashiach, Hosanna, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We're about to get back into it with the life of Josephus. We're in chapter 4 and 10. All praises to the Most High, Yahweh Shem, Yahweh Shai, through His Son. As usual, this channel and this information is targeted towards the so-called black man and black woman all over the world who relate and can feel and understand the words of the Bible, and you can't explain why, and you don't know why the Most High Yahweh Hashem has probably kept His love for you and your ancestors through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Jacob. But we will be reading the scriptures here as we go through. The life of Josephus Flavius, 4 and 10. And this was the state Tiberius was now in. But as for Gishkala, its affairs were thus: when John, the son of Levi, saw some of the citizens much elevated upon their revolt from the Romans, he labored to restrain them and entreated them that they would keep their allegiance to them. But he could not gain his purpose, although he did his endeavors to the utmost. For the neighboring people of Gadara, Gabara, and Sagana with the Tyrians got together a great army and fell upon Gishkala and took Gishkala by force and set it on fire. And when they had entirely demolished it, they returned home. Upon which John, the son of Levi, was enraged that he armed all these men and joined battle with the people forementioned and rebuilt Gishkala after a manner better than before, and fortified it with walls for its future security. But Gamala preserved in its allegiance to the Romans for the reason following: Philip, the son of Jachimus, who was their governor under King Agrippa, had been unexpectedly preserved when the royal palace at Jerusalem had been sieged. But as he fled away, had he fallen into another danger, and was of being killed, and that was of being killed by Manahem and the robbers that were with him. But certain Babylonians who were of his kindred and were then in Jerusalem hindered the robbers from executing their design. So Philip stayed there 4 days and fled away on the 5th, having disguised himself with a fictitious hair that he might not be discovered. And when he was come to one of the villages, him belonging, but one that was situated at the border of the citadel of Gamala, he sent to some of those that were under him and commanded them to come to him. But the Most High Yahweh Hashem himself hindered that his intention, and this for his own advantage also. For had it not so happened, he had certainly perished. For a fever having seized upon him, immediately he wrote to Agrippa and Bernice, and gave them to one of his freedmen to carry them to Varus, who at this time was procurator of the kingdom, which the king and his sister had entrusted him withal, while they were gone to Berytus with an intention of meeting Gesius. When Varus had received these letters of Philip and had learned that he was preserved, he was very uneasy at it, as supposing that he should appear useless to the king and his sister. Now Philip was come. He therefore produced the carrier of the letters before the multitude, and accused him of forging the same, and said that he spake falsely when he related that Philip was at Jerusalem fighting among the Jews against the Romans, so he slew him. And when this freed man of Philip did not return, again Philip was doubtful what should be the occasion of this stay, and sent a second messenger with letters that he might upon his return inform him what had befallen the other that had been sent before, and why he tarried so long. Varus accused this messenger also when he came of telling a falsehood, and he slew him, for he was puffed up by the Syrians that were at Caesarea, and had great expectations, for they said that Agrippa would be slain by the Romans for their crimes, which the so-called Jews had committed, and that he should himself take the government as derived from the kings. For Varus was, by the confession of all of the royal family, as being a descendant of Sohemus, who had enjoined the tetrarchy about Labanus, for which reason it was that he was puffed up and kept the letters to himself, and he contrived also that the king should not meet with those writings by guarding all the passes, lest anyone should escape and inform the king what had been done. He moreover slew many of the so-called Jews in order to gratify the Syrians of Caesarea. He had a mind also to join with the Trachonites of Batanea, and to take up arms and make an assault upon the Babylonian Jews that were at Ecbatana. For that was the name they went by. He therefore called to him 12 of the so-called Jews of Caesarea of the best character, and ordered them to go to Ecbatana and inform their countrymen who dwelt there, that Varus have heard that you intend to march against the king, but not believing that report, he hath sent us to persuade you to lay down your arms, and that this compliance would be a sign that he did well not to give credit to those that raised the report concerning you. He also enjoined them to send 70 of their principal men to make a defense for them as to the accusation laid against them. So when the 12 messengers came to their countrymen at Ecbatana, and found that they had no designs of innovation at all, they persuaded them to send the 70 men also, who not at all suspecting what would come, sent them accordingly. So these 70 went down to Caesarea together with the 12 ambassadors, where Varus met them with the king's forces, and slew them all together with the 12 ambassadors, and made an expedition against the so-called Jews of Ecbatana. But one there was of the 70 who escaped, and made haste to inform the so-called Jews of their coming, upon which they took their arms with their wives and children, and retired to their citadel at Gamala, leaving their own villages full of all sorts of good things, and having many tens of thousands of cattle therein. When Philip was informed of these things, he also came to the citadel of Gamala, and when he was come, the multitude cried aloud and desired him to resume the government. Jake. So-called black man and woman always crying to some person to rule them. And to make an expedition against Varus and the Syrians of Caesarea, for it was reported that they had slain the king, but Philip restrained their zeal, and put them in mind of the benefits of the king and had bestowed upon them, and told them how powerful the Romans were, and said it was not for their advantage to make war with them. At this time, that man Philip is very correct. The Roman, they was getting, this is right when they had been turning into the empire, and they're on a high right now that I don't even think drugs can give you. The Romans are very high right now. And told them how powerful the Romans were, and said it was not of their advantage to make war with them, and at length he prevailed with them. But now, when the king was acquainted with Varus's design, which was to cut off the so-called Jews of Caesarea, being many 10,000s, with their wives and children and all, in one day he called to him Equiculus Modius, and sent him to be Varus's successor, as we have elsewhere related. But still Philip kept possession of the citadel of Gamala and of the country adjoining it, which thereby continued in their allegiance to the Romans. This is we haven't even gotten deep into it yet. We're just reading about the life and times of Mr. Flavius right now. The life of Josephus Flavius, 5 and 12. Now, as soon as I was come into Galilee, and had learned this state of things by the information such as told me of them, I wrote to the Sanhedrin at Jerusalem about them, and required their direction what I should do. Their direction was that I should continue there, and that if my fellow legates were willing, I should join with them in the care of Galilee. But those my fellow legates, having gotten great riches from those tithes which as priests were their dues and were given to them, determined to return to their own country. Yet when I desired them to stay so long, that we might first settle the public affairs, they complied with me. So I removed together with them from the city of Sepphoris, and came to a certain village called Bethmos, 4 furlongs distant from Tiberias. And thence I sent messengers to the Senate of Tiberius, and desired that principal men of the city would come to me. And when they were come, Justus himself being also with them, I told them that I was sent to them by the people of Jerusalem as a legate, together with these other priests, in order to persuade them to demolish that house which Herod the Tetrarch had built there, and which had the figures of living creatures in it, although our laws having forbidden us to make any such figures, and desired that they would give us leave so to do immediately. But for a good while Capitolus and the principal men belonging to the city would not give us leave, but were at length entirely overcome by us, and were induced to be of our opinion. So so Jesus, this ain't even my Yahushai, or the Yahushai that I praise and that you should be praising. So Jesus, or Isis, the son of Saphias, one of those whom we have already mentioned as the leader of a seditious tumult of mariners and poor people, prevented us, and took with him certain Galileans, and set the entire place on fire, and thought he should get a great deal of money thereby, because he saw some of the roofs gilt with gold. They also plundered a great deal of furniture which was done without approbation, for after we had discoursed with Capellus and the principal men of the city, we departed from Bethamus and went into the upper Galilee. But this Aesus, or Jesus, and his party slew all the Greeks and the inhabitants of Tiberias, and as many others were the enemies before the war began. When I understood this, the state of things, I was greatly provoked, and went down to Tiberias, and took all the care I could of the royal furniture to recover all that could be recovered from such as had plundered it. They considered of the candlesticks made of Corinthian brass, and of royal tables, and of a great quantity of uncoined silver, and I resolved to preserve whatsoever came to my hand for the king. So I sent for 10 of the principal men of the same, and for Capellus the son of Antyllus, and committed furniture to them, with this charge, that they should part with it nobody else but myself. From thence I and my fellow legates went to Gishkala, to John, as desirous to know his intentions, and soon saw that he was for the innovations, and had a mind to the principality, for he desired me to give him authority to carry off the corn which belonged to Caesar, and lay in the villages of Upper Galilee, and he pretended that he would expand what it came to in building the walls of his own city. But when I perceived what he endeavored at, and what he had in his mind, I said I would not permit him so to do, for that I thought either to keep it for the Romans, for myself now I was entrusted with the public affairs there by the people of Jerusalem. But when he was not able to prevail with me, he betook himself to my fellow legates, for they had no sagacity in providing for futurity, and were very ready to take bribes. So he corrupted them with money to decree that all the corn which was within his province should be delivered to him, while I, who was but one, was outvoted by two, and held my tongue. Then did John introduce another cunning contrivance of his, for he said that those so-called Jews who inhabited Caesarea Philippi were shut up by the orders of the king's deputy there, had sent to him to desire him that, since they had no oil that was pure for their use, he would provide a sufficient quantity of such oil for them, lest they should be forced to make use of oil that came from the Greeks, and thereby transgress their own laws. Now this was said by John, not out of his regard to religion, but out of his most flagrant desire of gain, for he knew that 2 sectaries were sold with them of Caesarea for 1 drachma, but at Gishkala 80 sectaries was sold for 4 sectaries. So he gave order that all the oil which was there should be carried away, as having my permission, for doing which yet I did not grant him voluntarily, but only out of fear of the multitude, since if I had forbidden him, I should have been stoned by them. When I had therefore permitted this to be done by John. He gained vast sums of money by this his knavery. But when I had dismissed the life of Josephus 6:14, but when I had dismissed my fellow legates and sent them back to Jerusalem, I took care to have arms provided and the cities fortified. And when I had sent for the most hardy among the robbers, I saw that it was not in my power to take their arms from them, but I persuaded the multitude to allow them money as pay, and told them it was better for them to give them a little willingly, rather than to be forced to overlook them when they plundered their goods from men. And when I had obliged them to take an oath and not to come into that country unless they were invited to come, or else when they had not their pay given them, I dismissed them and charged them neither to make an expedition against the Romans, nor against those their neighbors that lay around about them. For my first care was to keep Galilee in peace. So I was willing to have the principal of the Galileans in all 70 hostages for their fidelity, but still under the notion of friendship. Like I said, I wanna always instill this. So we're reading from the life of Josephus. So this means we're reading about around the time of the five emperors. Going into the time of the five good emperors and stuff. So this is relatively around 30, maybe 4 years past the presence and the first coming of Yahweh Shai by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, who the world calls Jesus. Accordingly, I made them my friends and companions as I journeyed, and set them to judge causes, and with their approbation, and it was that I gave my sentences, while I endeavored not to mistake what justice required, and to keep my hands clear of all bribery in these determinations. I was now about the 30th year of my age, in which time of life is a hard thing for anyone to escape the calumnies of the envious, although he restrained himself from fulfilling any unlawful desires, especially where a person is in great authority. Yet did I preserve every woman free from injuries, and as to what presents were offered me, I despised them as not standing in need of them, nor indeed would I take those tithes which were due to me as a priest from those that brought them. Yet I do confess that I took part of the spoils of those Syrians which inhabited the cities that adjoined to us when I conquered them, and that I sent them to my kindred at Jerusalem, although when I twice took Sepphoris by force, and Tiberias 4 times, and Gadara once, and when I had subdued and taken John, when often laid treacherous snares for me, I did not punish with death either him or any of the people named as the progressor of this discourse will show, and on this account I suppose it was that the Most High Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai, who is never unacquainted with those that do as they ought to do, delivered me still out of the hands of these my enemies, afterwards preserved me when I fell into those many dangers which I shall relate hereafter.